It's May 2020 in Eddington, New Mexico, effectively a ghost town where all residents are staying inside and quarantined because of COVID-19. You guys remember that? Coronavirus, when we were all staying inside during the pandemic. Everybody is online, everybody is staring at their screens and sharing cynical memes about where the world's going and who's running it. And this all comes down to Sheriff Joe Cross, played by Joaquin Phoenix, Sheriff of Eddington, who has just had a bit of a spat with the mayor, Ted Garcia, played by Pedro Pascal, specifically concerning masks and where you should and shouldn't wear them. This escalates as somebody films the sheriff talking with the mayor, somebody posts a thing about the mayor and what he said about the sheriff, and Pedro Pascal and Joaquin Phoenix begin to have this feud that becomes a boiling pot of cynicism and hilarity, and what can only be described as what people are saying is the first truly modern Western, a COVID Western, which is a bananas idea. But this is all coming from Ari Aster, writer and director, who also wrote and directed Beau is Afraid with Joaquin Phoenix, Hereditary, Midsommar, things we are big fans of on this show. Very much so. Some of us have even got ink for it, all right? So we're very much looking forward to talking about this very oddly shaped film called Eddington. It is 2.5 hours long. It is a haul, all right? And it's not doing that good at the box office, but it's coming from A24. We're very excited to talk about it. Andy, what did you think of Eddington?
So I didn't know what to think initially. I had to sit with it. And initially I was like, I'm not sure if I like this movie or not. But the more I've thought about it, it's really grown on me. It's given me a lot to think about. And I think it actually might be kind of brilliant. But it's definitely challenging material. It kind of rubs our noses at a time we don't really want to revisit for a number of reasons, not just the shared trauma of the pandemic, of the divisive nature of kind of both sides politically. And Aster is very cynical in his filmmaking, but he has this main point that we forgot how to have discussions with each other, how to talk to each other in order to solve larger problems. It reminds me of Game of Thrones. That's the whole thing in Game of Thrones, that there's so much infighting that a larger problem is ignored, and that's kind of what's happening here. Sheriff Joe is worried about the mayor is worried about re-election. Sheriff Joe is worried about his reputation amongst the community, and their feud means that they're ignoring larger things. There is a homeless man in the movie, homeless problem that no one really wants to address. He kind of just shows up and is annoying, and everyone is worried about different things and has their own interest in mind, and they're ignoring very real problems. So I think in the end it's kind of brilliant.
Yeah, Eddington is so much about the setting, right? Which is why it's appropriately titled, like, not only in New Mexico, but late 2020. Like, we all remember, every adult going to see Eddington lived through this time, like, and recalls this odd friction that the whole world had, where you couldn't go into work and you weren't supposed to go to restaurants and you couldn't go outside and everything was closed off and you'd better wear a mask. And some people are like, well, I can't breathe in them. And the memes and how we dunked on one another, and we got excited when like Animal Crossing came out on the Nintendo because it was something to do. Like how we all just got so wound up, right? Like in this place that we were in on the internet. And Aster cites this as exactly where Eddington comes from. He was on Twitter in 2020. He remembers all this. Like he just wanted to depict kind of like the world he felt like he was seeing. And it's weird now, and it's cynical now to revisit because we're now years past that. And Eddington often feels so directly on the nose for all of us that lived through it. And this boiling pot of chaos that just gets deeper and worse as the stakes get higher in the movie feels so funny because it's realistic. And more importantly, we've all come so far from that since. Eddington is like a fictionalized, smaller version of so many towns in America. And I have taken a lot of road trips, big road trip fan. I feel like I've driven through 36 Eddingtons in the United States, like just ghost towns where like windows are broken out and nobody's coming outside and everything's quiet. And that is used as this perfect foil for Ari Aster to have these showdowns in a ghost town right out of a Western, right? Where like two people are coming out and debating one another. It's almost like they're going to get their guns out, but instead of guns, you've got phones. And instead of like pulling a drawing on somebody, you're going to film it and put it on live, like, and people are going to see it and judge it later out of context. And somebody's comment about a mask or a goofy pandemic restriction can suddenly be turned into, you're an enemy of the state and you're a bad guy, and vice versa. Protests can be turned into terrorism. Like, the way perspective can create this crazy friction between one another and this breakdown in communication. Our Aster script is brilliant. He's very funny. Sorry, Andy, you should take this a minute.
No, I think one of the things that's brilliant, what kicks off, they're already feuding at the beginning, but what escalates it is Sheriff Joe Cross, Joaquin Phoenix's character. He makes a post on Facebook, kind of because he's standing up to the mask mandate or something of that nature, and he gets a lot of engagement. He gets a lot of likes. He gets people commenting, and this really boosts his self-worth. And because he is going through it at home, which we'll talk about it later, but this leads to him announcing that he's going to run for mayor, and that's what creates a ton of tension between him and the existing mayor. And like Zach was saying, there's several parts where big social media posts are what kind of propel the narrative forward in good ways and bad, but it's a real interesting look at how social media is a big part of this. One thing that will make a lot of people uncomfortable is they bring up the BLM protests of 2020 and the death of George Floyd. And initially, this is something happening elsewhere, happening in Minnesota, happening elsewhere in big cities. And eventually, this protest movement makes its way to Eddington, and you start seeing small protests out on their deserted streets with like 13 people. And what's really funny and uncomfortable is that these are all led by white people. There's particularly a young white girl who is the leader, and a couple of her peers, boys that we meet, they get involved as well, but they get involved because she's into the social justice, not necessarily because it's like, well, if the girl I like is doing this, so I'm going to do it too. So they start showing up to the protests, and it's real uncomfortable. It's real just kind of rubbing your nose in the way a lot of things, not just that movement, but the way a lot of movements and a lot of things get co-opted by the wrong people for the wrong reasons.
Yeah, there's a ton of screens in this movie. Lots of screen time, right? Phones, televisions, live casts, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, TikTok. Like, you see a lot of these apps, iPhones, right? Like, it's very practical, and it makes the world feel very grounded. And also gives you a lot of avenue to talk about politics, right? Sheriff Joe Cross is a bit more right-leaning. Ted Garcia is a bit more left. But as you get to know them, you find that, it's not all red and blue. It's not so clear. And I've seen a lot of people saying that Aster is both sidesing this movie. I disagree. I think he's coming out in one particular direction while also saying, hey, like, we're all being a little ridiculous, or at least we were 5 years ago before we ended up where we're at now, which feels like a brakeless freewheel away from where this movie is even referencing, right? Like, somehow even this feels dated, even though it's so radically different than things we otherwise see. I do want to talk about the family dynamic. Andy mentioned it.
Yes.
Sheriff Joe Cross lives at home with his wife, played by Emma Stone, named Louise, and his mother-in-law, her mom, her actual mom, played by Deidre O'Connell, who's actually really funny in this movie. And they live together because of the pandemic, right? Like, everybody's quarantined, everyone's in, and their house is this like cluttered mess, man. Everything's dusty, and his wife's got this like funny hobby where she makes these little like statue figurine things, and he's trying to be supportive of her and encouraging and wants to start a family, and she is like cold and closed off, and they're both addicted to their screens and like turning away from one another. Mom's watching conspiracy content and printing it out and saying, "Do you hear what the government said today? Oh my God, it's, the globalist elite." Like, it just feels like it skewers this like part of American society that is so quiet and so at home that people can share with one another, but nobody wants to talk about. Like, this escalates when Joaquin Phoenix and Emma Stone's characters get in an argument, and they have this like horribly awkward exchange, like that's really cringy and hilarious. And the mom inserts herself in this really clever one-er shot where she's like hiding behind this shawl thing. Like, it's got all of the visual flair of Aster's best work with the comedy nature of his more recent stuff. Beau is Afraid, to create this like cringy, funny, brutally honest, authentic look. at how we all treat one another, even behind closed doors.
Yeah, the family dynamic is really fascinating, and like Zach said, Joaquin and company are like really not smart, uneducated conspiracy theorists. But then on the other side, we have Pedro Pascal, who is the more kind of eloquent, upstanding, respected member of the community. But he's also kind of everything he does is for his own self-interest. Like there in the background of all this is a big data center that he's trying to get built, and that's going to bring jobs and energy and all this stuff to the community. And that's really his concern, because if he gets this thing built, then he's probably going to get reelected, and it's going to, so he's doing everything for personal gain. And he is the one who is, adamant about the mask mandates and about 6 feet and about not having too many people at the store. And again, Aster is showing the ridiculousness of kind of both sides of what was happening at the time. But again, the main issue he's pointing out is our inability to communicate with each other over shared problems.
Yeah. I want to talk about the hard R rating briefly, because I know we got to wrap this up, but this film is R rated. It's 2.5 hours long. And so far, what Andy and I have talked about seems funny and cynical, but like not necessarily mandating like the rating that's here. Things get quite wild in Eddington. This pot begins to boil over in small fashion. And I feel like I was very satisfied with where it ends up going. I feel like I've seen some people say like, it's messy, or like it gets real wild later, and like I don't know. I was into it the whole time. I really enjoyed it. At some point I realized I feel like this is probably one of my favorite movies of the year. What do you think, Andy? Definitely deserving of the rating.
I feel like it gets, yeah, well, definitely that. There's lots of violence eventually. I feel like it gets better the longer it goes, and it kind of gets more exciting. We get more and more action. I had an older couple next to me that they got up and left about 90 minutes in, and it was like just as it was getting really, really interesting. And I was like, you're leaving at the best part. I hadn't even finished the movie, and I was like, I know it's only going to get better from here. So that was kind of puzzling. But I did hear people that there were walkouts when this premiered at Cannes, and I've heard of other people walking out of screenings. But that's how I know that someone is doing something really bold. If there's people walking out, it definitely gets better the longer it goes.
Yeah, it's funny. I had people in my theater a few seats down from me, also older folks, and like about halfway through the movie, Dad starts narrating to Mom what's going to happen in each scene. It'll like cut to a new scene, and he's like, "Oh man, he's going to go talk to the mayor." Cut to a new scene. Oh, he's gonna call that person. I'm just like, he's like narrating the movie before it happens based on what he thinks, which was obnoxious for a minute, but then it takes a turn and he suddenly like goes quiet. And then by the time the movie hits credits, he was like, that was one of the best movies I've seen all year. So like he came around, he was a big believer, and I think I'm in the same boat. I gotta know recommendations. Andy, would you recommend Eddington?
I think I would, with some caveats. Just the content warning: it is about a very kind of traumatic time in American history, the COVID pandemic of May 2020. Everything involved with that, health-wise, politically, socially, lots going on. But it's a comedy. There's lots of a black comedy at that, but there's lots of laugh out loud moments. We get incredible performances from Joaquin Phoenix, largely, who is the main character. Pedro Pascal is more in a supporting role, as is everyone else. It's really the story of Joe Cross. So I would recommend it if you're intrigued by what we've said today, knowing that it covers some difficult topics.
Yeah, I would recommend it as well. I think it is one of Aster's best. It might be his best movie. I'm not sure about that, but I do think it's better than Beau is Afraid. If you didn't like that movie, I think this is a fresh pass at it. It's obviously not sharing the horror trappings of something like Hereditary or Midsommar, but it's got that same visual DNA in it. And I love the way Aster manages to turn the screws on all of us, right? Like, and how many of us act. It's good stuff. I think Eddington is a banger. I'm looking forward to picking it up whenever it comes out. Yeah, that's Eddington.